Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Kitchen time and something a bit different, some of the cooler growers. I think I've only filmed repotting one Restrepia and that was flipping ages ago. Anyway, we've got a Masdevallia hybrid, no ID, deliberately not watered today, so the pot's dry. I can see through the pot, there's quite a few dying or dead roots in there, but it does have an amount of new growth pushing on at the moment, so I'm going to take advantage of that one. This Restrepia is just not growing as well as it should be. It hasn't pushed up an actual new growth from the base for some considerable time, and I think I may have got my date wrong, my repot date. I think it may have just been in its pot too long. But there's something not quite right. It's not growing as well as it should. Nonetheless, it's blooming. Restrepias seem to just bloom no matter what they do for me. And then the other one, this little species Restrepia, I think it's Falkenbergii, yes it is. This was the first Restrepia I ever got from Burnham's, and I've had this one a long time. I think I got this back in 2014, so it's obviously grown an awful lot. But some of the more recent growths are starting to get this concertina look, so something's not quite right in the pot. And quite honestly, looking at the pot, there's hardly any moss in there, it's nearly all bark. It's got an excellent root system, don't get me wrong, but it's not staying hydrated. It needs more moss in the mix. So that's probably what's wrong with this, is it's just, because it's such a large plant now, it's actually just drying too fast. So we'll put that one to one side, we'll put that one to one side, and we'll get the Masdevallia out first. Once upon a time I had quite a few Masdevallia hybrids, and I lost track of which ones were which. I have pictures of all of them when they last bloomed, and this one hasn't bloomed for a very long time, and I don't know which one it is. So at some point hopefully it will bloom again. And this one did have some moss in it, but again it's a bit heavy on the bark here, and boy does that stink of mushroom. So the media has gone. I reckon I got my repot date wrong, so I hope I've caught this one in time. As I said, it is pushing a few new growths here in places. There are some active roots, but not as many as there should be. And yeah, this media's gone. This should have been done a while ago. As I say, I think I just got my date wrong in my notes. That's a mistake when you've got a lot of plants that can be costly, quite honestly, and this might be one of them. Hopefully there's enough, I mean there are reasonable roots, so there should be enough for this to recover. It just needs a fresh media. Obviously once the media starts to go, especially when it's got sphagnum moss in it, it's going to get very acidic, and although these don't mind a little bit of acidity, there's a limit to how much they'll tolerate, and then the roots start going. So yeah, there's very dead roots on here, and a fair few of them, but there are also some good ones. So we'll give that a bit of a rinse. I've got a feeling that it may fall into pieces. That piece is just going to come off, but then it's only got one leaf, I'm not fussed. That's an old piece of plant there. There's an old piece of plant there. But that's got nice new growth and some new roots. So, I mean, this probably could do with splitting, but I'm just trying to get as many older pieces out of the way as I can, leaving the new bits or the newer parts. I don't want to go too mad with it. It would split. But then I have two plants the same, and I don't want two plants the same. I'd rather have one larger plant, and as it's pushing out new growths in various places, it will still act like one plant. I mean, even this little plantlet here, that would come off and make a new plant. It has a new growth, but you know, it would for me it would just be better remaining as part of the main plant. So it's probably attached in some shape or form. So that's about as much as I can do with that without going too mad. I think I've got most of the older parts of the plant out. They just pull out, the older parts, when they die back like that. They just pull out, leaving room for new bits to grow. But if I go much further than that, it will fall apart. I think that will do. Yep. Well, I've had worse Masdevallia root systems than that, but I will have to do a bit of trimming and get some of these old dead root sections out. And we'll leave it at that. I'll give it a rinse under the tap and give it a, make sure the last of that old media is out of the way. It often really hangs on to the base of the plant, and that's where the new roots are going to at first go, and that's the worst place for old stale broken down media to be, where the new root tips are. So in the sink with you, that's one. This is actually a project plant. By rights I should be repotting this as a separate entity, but all three of these are going in the same media, so it would seem a bit daft doing it separately. This plant originally came from Peter White, who got a job lot out of the Eric Young Foundation, probably due to his presence in the orchid world, very senior in the RHS and stuff like that. But he had a tray full of Eric Young Foundation crosses, their own crosses. And I thought we'll have a couple of them because those don't come out to play very often. I think I had 3 originally. One got given away to somebody else, and I've got 2 left. Well, that's got a nice little root system. It still does, it niffs a bit though. It's been in there a little bit too long, and I just think it just needs rejuvenating into something that holds moisture longer and doesn't get dry in between. But that's not a bad little root system for a Restrepia. There's not too much dead roots on there. Most of those, there's a section there that's dead, that's probably the oldest part of the plant, but all round the outside are good roots, so it just needs a trim in the middle. That'll be the easy one. And a rinse under the sink just to get the old parts out. Let's pop that one up, that should be okay. Now the difficult one. This is a very large plant. It's in a wide, shallow pot. Most Restrepias don't have a deep root run. And this is just drying out too fast. That's all I think is wrong with this. This would split into 4 good sized plants. You might even get 6 out of it. I'd rather have one large plant, but it depends what happens when I start dealing with this. It is quite possible. Got a feeling that bit of bark pinged into my coffee. Ah! Oh, a bit of bark. I'll live. Yeah, this is incredibly dry in places, and it's got an awful lot of larger bark in there. What on earth I thought I was doing there? I really don't know. I'm going to tease as much as I can out. This is a good root system. This should recover quickly, and there shouldn't be a load of large dead sections on this one because it had the wide shallow pot, so it should have spread its roots out quite evenly. There's some moss up in the centre. On its way. Not gone as far as the other one was. Certainly not as far as that Masdevallia. That really was on the way out, that one. Doesn't do them any good. It really doesn't. But this has got a good root system. I mean, this may easily fall into many plants when I rinse this. But if it does, they'll all get packed back together and it will get potted up again in a large pot. So I want to keep it as a single plant. I find that it's difficult to get rid of Restrepias. A lot of people are frightened to death of having any, even though they grow Masdevallias and they need exactly the same conditions. I'll say exactly the same. The Restrepias, quite honestly, could do with a little more humidity than even Masdevallias like. It is said these are most comfortable in relatively cool conditions with around 90% humidity. That's bordering on condensation all over the place, not far off. And they like air movement. They won't take, you know, cold, damp, still air, but that's still an intact plant with a good root system. So I think that just needs its media refreshed. Very branching root system. It's going to go back in a shallow pot again, and I think all I will probably do is just trim the roots. When you get a very branching root system like that, by trimming the ends of the root, you actually encourage more roots to grow. It's like I've said before, if there's a single growing tip on a root, that's all it's going to do. If you snip it and it branches in 5 or 6 places, you've now got 5 or 6 growing points on your root system. So it does actually work. There's some roots you don't want to do it with, or you just lose the root. It'll just stop growing. So you've got to go careful. That little bit's just not going to go, is it? Right, give that a rinse, not much. And a lot of the rinsing on this is to rehydrate those roots. They are incredibly dry. Right, so I'll get myself some media sorted out. They're all going in the same media. I'll sort out pot sizes and I'll be back. Okay, let's see what we can do then. We'll pot up this little Restrepia first. A lot of the roots did have to come off of this. There's still the odd dead one left, but I was just getting a bit too close to where the new ones are, and sometimes, you know, you try and get one dead root off and take 3 good ones off. So that'll have to do. I don't really want to go mad on this one. As I said, it's got some reasonable roots. I wouldn't say it's an excellent root system, but you can see where this has been grown on from a seedling, where the little tiny leaves were. So yeah, it's pushed on. I've given this one a tidy up and trimmed the older flower spikes off. It just makes the plant look a bit tidier, but you do need to go careful when you're trimming the old spikes off. Make sure you don't take the buds off at the same time. It's very easy to do. I don't know how on earth I know that, but I do. Right, now with this needs to sit quite near the top of the pot. I'm just going to hold the plant still and trickle feed the media. No gaps, no air gaps. It must be in contact with the root system all round. But by wiggling it, it should keep the root system nicely spread, so that you don't... I mean, some people actually grab hold of the roots on plants like this and wrap them and then sit them in the pot and put more media around the outside. If you do that, all the roots are going to be in the centre of the pot, all squashed up together. Now they will eventually grow new roots into the space, and those old roots should still progress outwards and branch, you know, into the new media. But I like to give them a chance to spread out into the new media so that the existing roots have got new media around them and are not surrounded by another mass of roots, if you see what I mean. They can get quite bunched up by doing it that way. Now, strangely enough, probably the Restrepias, along with the Tolumnias, are some of the finest root systems I've got. They're almost impossible to crush. I don't know why it is, but you can apply a fair bit of force around the base of a Restrepia plant. You won't actually harm the roots, you'll actually do them some good because it packs them in and makes sure they're in contact with the media. But I don't press directly on the roots, I still go down the edge of the pot. If I press any harder, that cracking sound sounded like the pot to me. Flipping cheap rubbish. So I go quite hard round these, and then I just top dress. Now if these flop over a little bit, it doesn't matter, that is their natural pattern, that is how they grow. But I still need to know that all of the roots are under the media. You very, very rarely will see a Restrepia with aerial roots. Their roots go down. Very rarely do you see aerial ones. So if that's how they want to grow, then it pays to accommodate them and make sure they've got all their roots covered up. Now again, I don't want to get too close to the top of the pot, otherwise when I water it, all the media will flow out over the edge, much to my annoyance. So that's probably about it for that one, and then I should be able to let go and it'll just hold itself. So good watering with that to settle that media. Just double check that I haven't got any air gaps, which I haven't. There's no point in staking this really. It has a natural floppy growth. Wouldn't do it any good to stake it anyway. It probably wouldn't stay there. But it does need to hold itself in the pot, and that's still a little loose. I'm going to go down even harder. It's probably because it only had a light root system, you know, but nonetheless, it still needs to be quite firm. Alright, that's a bit better. That will settle when it gets watered, and quite honestly, as long as a Restrepia isn't dying on you, they're quite vigorous in the root department. They will shoot out roots, the roots that are there will branch, and they soon get a hold in a new pot. So that's that one. Needs a good water. Right, that used that much of the media. I don't want to run out, so we'll add a bit more in. We need a lot more moss. It's the Masdevallia I'm going to do next, and I want this one heavy on the moss. The last potting was very light on the moss, and I got a feeling what I did with that one when I potted it is I grabbed hold of the roots and surrounded it with moss and put a handful of moss up under the base of the plant to try and encourage the new roots. And then when I put the rest of the media in the pot, I probably didn't have enough moss in it, and it ended up being almost bark with hardly any moss at all. And of course that's where the new roots set off to, and that's the bit that dries out really quick. So probably wasn't potted as well as it should have been last time round. I'd like to put this Masdevallia in an open basket with live sphagnum moss, but they do need a lot of watering grown like that. And quite honestly, to come from the media this was in, which was almost bark, to go into soggy live sphagnum moss would probably be too dramatic a change for the root system. Masdevallias will object to a dramatic change in environment with their roots, and they will sometimes dump the whole root system. But if you've got new ones growing, they should recover quite quickly. Now, with this one I'm just putting the roots in loosely, again holding the plant up so that when I put the media in I know it's going to go under the base of the plant because I can see it. Yeah, so I make sure I've got media in under the base of the plant. If necessary, lift the plant and push it back down. Yeah, but not squashing all the roots up together. And I like to go down one side first and make sure that one's okay, then turn the pot round. That leaves the side that I haven't put any media in yet, and I can start on that side. And again, relatively small amount at a time to make sure I don't leave any gaps. You put a huge handful in, it's quite easy to get an air gap. You get a pocket where it all clumps up together and won't fall down. And if you repot with wet media, you're far more likely to get that problem. Now these roots will crush. These do not want a lot of squashing, unlike the Restrepia that doesn't seem to care. But these can crush, and there's also new ones pushing out here, so I'm not applying a huge amount of pressure to this plant. I'm just making sure that the root area is covered and it's in under the plant. That's where a lot of the new roots will come out from. Basically on a Masdevallia, virtually every new leaf you see is going to have a root or two underneath it as it progresses. So the root system is constantly replenishing itself, as are the leaves at the top. You don't tend to get a sudden root burst like you do with, say, a Cattleya. These tend to push out roots on and off throughout the time that they're growing, along with the top growth, which just seems to keep going, a little bit at a time. You very rarely get a stage with a Masdevallia where nothing's happening. There's usually something going on somewhere. And I was told once that if that something all grinds to a halt and there doesn't seem to be any growth, the next thing that's liable to happen is it may bloom. I don't seem to get that sort of luck. But anyway, that one's holding itself nicely in the pot, nice and upright. Just making sure we're right up to the base of the plant, but not burying it. You can get the base of the plant to rot with these. They keep too soggy. The amount of air movement I've got, that's unlikely to happen. Right, no ID on that one. Check for air pockets. 0. Nice one. That's that one done. Now that's all the easy stuff done. Now we've got this flipping thing to do. I can't get all the old media out, but you see what I said about the centre of the plant effectively being hollow? Yeah? That was the old root system in there, and that bit had gone. But it's pushed out roots all around the outside. So I do have a good root system. I need to get that leaf out, otherwise it's only going to get buried. That's one of the original leaves. So strictly speaking, when you're going to plant one of these, if you've got leaves right down in the media, you ought to take them off because they will rot. Although that one's been in there like that such a long time and it hasn't. But you see, like this leaf here, you know, it's right down in there. It's only going to rot. So just lift them out so that all your old leaves, which is what those are clear of the media. One more, that big one there. That'll do. All the rest are okay. And I haven't tidied this one. This is what I'm getting at with the older flower spikes. Look how many there are. And they make the plant look really tatty. But this one's starting to produce some kikis as well. So I want to leave everything as it is for now. And then I can decide where the kikis are, whether I want to take some off and plant them up. And then possibly give it a tidy up around that time. Right, I'll have a little break there because I need to get some more moss on the go. We are getting a trifle low. I sent an email to Peter White to bring some along to the show on Saturday. I've got a lot of repotting to do and I tend to use more of this than I used to. And one plant I'm reasonably certain is going to go in one of those flat open trays like the Wilbur Chang. And that will use that up, just lining it, let alone media. So I've got a couple of these on order, but although I sent an email to Peter White, on my Facebook page are some lovely photos of him out in Thailand enjoying himself. So I doubt if he's read my email. But hopefully his assistant is keeping her eye on things like that. And if he doesn't bring them to the show on Saturday, when Peter Orchid Accessories, that's his website, heads off to a show, I'm sure he's got a set stuff that he takes, and then he's got his orders, pre-orders that he packs up, but he's got his set amount of stuff that he takes to lay out on his table. So he would have some of this moss anyway, and as I'm going to be there at the crack of dawn, I get first crack at it. So but if he knows somebody wants an amount of something, he puts extra in, which makes sense. Anyway, I'll get some more moss on the soak, have a quick break, and I'll be back. Well, that ended up being a long break. Got a bit carried away editing my part 4 of my, Project Orchids video. I must admit, most of my videos get no editing, so when I do get one that's heavy on the editing, I do quite enjoy it. Need to practice because it doesn't happen often. Now I'm going to try and get a handful of media up in the centre here. I doubt if it's going to stay there very well, but I've got to try because that's like a vacant space. And certainly if I don't try now, trying to get some media in under the base of the plant, I'll end up pushing all the roots to the centre, which I don't like doing. So I should now just be able to lower that. And yeah. Now most of the roots are heading towards the outside. They won't end up on the outside because that's where I do my pushing and shoving, but otherwise they'd all be bunched up in the middle. And that's not how a root system would grow if you think about it. It would naturally spread out. So trying to get it to start out like that is worth doing if you can. Again, I'm filling up one side of the pot. Not right up to the top, but getting a good base there so that when I turn the pot round I can push in against that, knowing that that side's okay, and then I can start around here and get to the other parts. Very fine root system on Restrepias. as I say, apart from Tolumnias, there aren't many other plants that with orchids that have got root systems as fine as this. You know, they're like hair, very, very fine. And you would think they're delicate, but they're flipping not. Not on Restrepias, tough as old boots. They'll put up with a lot. But it is such an extensive root system that it would be very easy to get air pockets this time round, as the roots are so close together and there's so many of them. You know, they can stop the media going down between them. So again, just looking round the pot, making sure I haven't got any. Any at all this time round. And by putting that little handful under the centre before I started, hopefully that will stop the roots all getting squashed up into the middle of the plant. That was a good guess with the media, wasn't it? Just about right. Base of the plant with Restrepias, if it's slightly below the surface, is not a big deal the way these grow. With some plants it is a big deal. With these, not so much. If you look at where they grow in the wild, you've got a job to see the base of the plants. All you see is the leaves coming out from all the moss and you know, whatever else is on the branches that they grow on. Often found growing in amongst other plants. You just see the leaves poking out. So obviously, naturally, the base of the plant does get sort of down in the media, not buried, but very close, just below the surface. It's not bad. I've got a few roots I can still see. Get a bit more in round there, and that's about it. So I'm just double checking that I can't see any extensive roots above ground. They don't grow like that. The root systems are always in something, as opposed to the Tolumnias, which are never in anything. So that's that. I'll give that a good water now to settle it in. I mean, I pressed that down reasonably hard, and there's a lot more moss in the mix this time round, so hopefully it will stay wet longer, because this one was such an extensive root system and a reasonably large plant sat on the top of it that it was actually using up the water too quickly. And you know, I don't water individual plants, I water sets of plants, and this one could have done with a more frequent watering, and it didn't get it because it was in the set and it got watered with the others in that set, so it was getting quite dry in between. And these shouldn't dry out, you know, these in the winter time, if they're erring on the side of dry between water, it's not too bad. But you have to bear in mind these are cooler growers, so in the winter they are still growing, whereas some of my other orchids would have slowed right down almost to a stop, but these don't. They quite enjoy the winter time. They do carry on growing. The thing that will slow this type of plant up in the winter is a short day, because that they're not used to. And certainly where these are placed, the grow lights would have had little or no effect on them, because they were right in under, you know, they're on a lower shelf. I doubt if the light penetrated in there very much. So these would have slowed down purely because the day lengths were shorter, not because it was cooler. Right, so that's those three done. Let's get my muck out of the way so we can have a last look before they go back in the grow room. They'll all get a good watering now. To make sure that those roots are settled in nicely and that the media is touching all the roots, no gaps or anything. And a watering really does do that job. On something like a Cattleya, where it's going to go in large chunky bark, the watering doesn't do a lot for the roots as far as settling it down, because that large bark just sits in the position you put it. It doesn't really move much, whereas this does. It has a settling effect. So that's three: Masdevallia hybrid, identity unknown, and bloom unknown, until it gets on and pushes one up and lets me know. But with the new growths and some new roots associated with those new growths, I'm hoping that one will pull on nicely now. And this one's a slacker. Quite honestly, I bought 2 of the Eric Young Foundation Restrepias, and although this one blooms relatively frequently, it's not grown anywhere near as well as the other one. Sometimes that just happens. And my longest running Restrepia, the one I've had the longest, it was my first ever venture into the unknown. I think this was probably my first ever cooler growing type orchid. I think I got this before I ever got any Masdevallias. So anyway, we'll see how they do, and thanks for dropping by. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.